A couple of announcements for today. One is there is a round table, right, Mary? Yes. Woohoo! 4 o'clock, usual place, barrel room. Also, a couple of things are coming up. I don't know the situation, maybe one of the other faculty does, about the tickets for Tango Buenos Aires. Are there tickets left? Anybody know? I should know this, but I've been a little bit hectic. Next Sunday night is a presentation, a performance of Tango Buenos Aires. I bet it's awesome. I think it's in the Green Music Center. And there are free tickets available through FYE. Check with your faculty members if you're interested. I'm sure many of you are interested in dance. Tango is one of the most amazing forms of dance there is. So I would so totally be on that if I'm at all interested in dance, and I am. Also, next Monday, there is an FYE movie beginning at 5:30 in Ballroom B called The Zookeeper's Wife. This will be being introduced by Dr. Elaine Leader, who's a friend, old friend of the FYE program, also a former dean of the School of Social Sciences. And so it should be a really, really good night. That's next Monday, Ballroom B, 5:30 p.m., The Zookeeper's Wife. And so that's all the announcements. Our speaker today is Dr. Mary Churchill, one of our own. Woo-hoo! Dr. Churchill teaches like everywhere at Sonoma State University, particularly in the Women's and Gender Studies programs, and American Multicultural Studies programs, and Native American Studies programs. She is a very active scholar in the field of religious studies, especially as pertaining to women's spirituality and American Indian spiritualities, as we can see here. Her PhD is from UC Santa Barbara, and she has been on the faculty at University of Colorado Boulder and the University of Iowa. And she did a postdoctoral fellowship at the Radcliffe Institute for Advanced Study at Harvard. She's a very active leader in the religious studies nationwide, holding leadership positions in the American Academy of Religion, for instance. Please give a warm FYE welcome to our own Dr. Mary Churchill.
Got to give a shout out to my section up there. Yay! All right. Oh, what is that? Thank you. Awesome. Extra credit for you. Just kidding. All right. Good afternoon. Let's see. Can you hear me? Is that working? Okay. All right. Awesome. Okay. So I would really like you to listen. I will make the PowerPoint available to you, so I'm not going to wait for you to write down information. So listen, and you can get the information later. Okay, first of all, it's important to recognize whose land we are on. This is our closest native nation is Federated Indians of Great Rancheria. These are the Southern Pomo and coastal Miwok people. Many of you maybe have heard about the casino, but this nation is more than a casino. This is a people, and they are very active actually in our community, and so I want to point them out. So they are our local, our closest native nation. And I also, here we have a Southern Pomo dancer. But I also want to recognize that these are the ancestral territories of the Southern Pomo and the coastal Miwok people. This map here shows the pre-contact tribal territories. So California actually was one of the most diverse tribal areas, indigenous areas in the entire North America, actually, entire US and North America. So you can see here the Bay Area, and we are Pomo and Coast Miwok primarily. So it's important to acknowledge where we are, the sense of place. And also I want to express gratitude that the beautiful surroundings that we have here are not the result of just our local gardeners who are awesome, but of generations of indigenous peoples pruning and taking care of this place. And we are the fortunate beneficiaries of that. Okay, who am I? Well, you just heard a little introduction, but just in terms of ethos, right? In terms of ethos, I'm thinking today in terms of Native American studies, as well as as well as religious studies. Although I have these other things too. So these are my academic backgrounds. I would also like to point out that I have an indigenous ancestry. My great-grandmother was Cherokee, but I also want to point out that I'm a self-identified Native person, in the sense that, well, there are many ways to determine indigenous identity, and self-identification is merely one of them. I am not an enrolled tribal member of the Cherokee Nation. So there is, as I said, many ways here. Self-identification. People may know about their ancestry through their family stories, their knowledge passed down through families. But the other primary ways of Native identification, community identification. So people are known in their communities. They may identify in terms of their tribe, their band, their clan, not the Ku Klux Klan, but their kinship community. People may identify as part of reservation or urban Indian communities. Language can be an important source of tribal identity as well. And then there's external identification. So the federal government has forced onto American Indian nations a system of determining membership, and it's called enrollment. And so not all Native nations in the United States are recognized by the federal government. And so this excludes some Native people from, in a sense, legal status as Native people. And then as well, some tribes are only recognized by state governments. So just a sense here, this is a complicated issue, subject. I'm not going to be actually talking about identification or identity in this sense today. I have a particular way in which I want to talk about identity today. So, okay. All right, I want to ask, who has a water bottle with you today? Who has a water bottle? Yeah, you have your water with you? Awesome, awesome. Okay, so, and how has water helped you in the last 24 hours? How has water helped you? I'm seeing some groans here. What's that about? How's water helped you? How's water helped you, sir? Okay, keeps you hydrated. Awesome. How else? How else? I hope some of you took showers before you came today, right? Brushing our teeth, right? Cleaning, cooking, watering our plants. Water is a vital part of our life. Think about what your day would be like if you didn't have water. If you didn't have water. So I want to ask you to think about your relationship with water. Your relationship with water. This is an image I want to spend some time with today. It actually is it's a reflection of activism at the Standing Rock Reservation in the last year, starting in 2016. And for over a year, thousands of people congregated to the Standing Rock Reservation and the local areas to protest the building of the Dakota Access Pipeline. This pipeline, this is the path of the pipeline. You can see it goes through several reservation areas and through ancestral homelands from North Dakota to Illinois, and crossed ancestral lands as well as sacred areas and burial areas. As well, it is now going under the Missouri River, as well as Lake Oahe. So, so many, like I said, thousands of Native activists and allies went to Standing Rock to protest. And this is one of the banners that, that was shown. So I'm interested in this subject. We are water. What does that mean? We are water. So, of course, we might think about it in this sense, that the average body is 65% water. And I think that's a relevant point. Yes, and I think that's relevant, because if we want clean drinking water, we are mostly water, so that's going to have an effect on us, certainly. This is relevant, but I think something more is going on here. Something more is going on than just our physical composition. So, for today then, our agenda, in a sense, the flow. What's the flow going to be today? I want to talk about religious studies and American Indian studies as fields of study, the topic of identity, and then the parable of the sower. And you can see here on this image here, a creek flows nearby our school, Copeland Creek. And here's a picture of it. So go check it out. We have our own local water. All right, so I'm interested in this we are water then, coming from the point of view as a scholar of religious studies. And what is religious studies? Well, it's the comparative study of religion. We analyze religions, let's say Buddhism, Hinduism, indigenous traditions, Christianity, Judaism, all kinds of traditions. We're interested in ultimate values and meanings. Like what is the meaning of life? What are we put here for? What is the nature of the divine? What is the nature of personhood? So ultimate values. What does community mean? This study of religion, I like to say that that we are outsiders, not insiders. So meaning that this subject of religion can be taught in public universities because we are not practitioners, or at least we're not teaching as practitioners or believers. We can analyze religions from in an analytical kind of way. Of course, we do take what practitioners and believers say as we take it seriously, and we're interested in it, we value it, but we also bring our perspectives as scholars. So we're interested in beliefs and practices, institutions, and issues. Many of our contemporary issues today revolve around religion. Unfortunately, we do not have a religious studies department on this campus. I think there is a course on world religions, but that's about it. So anyway, I wish we did. So here we have an example of baptism in here. But I also am interested in this question of we are water from the point of view of Native American studies. And we do have a Native American studies minor at Sonoma State. This is an interdisciplinary study, as is religious studies for that matter. We're interested not only in American Indians historically, but also in contemporary times, so today. We're interested in Native cultures, literature, the arts, politics, economics, policies. We particularly value indigenous perspectives, indigenous visions, what is in the best interest of Native nations. And in particular, we emphasize sovereignty. Sovereignty, you may not have heard this term before, but it means, well, one meaning of it in a way is self-determination or self-rule. That the United States has over 500, they're called domestic dependent nations. So we are, Native peoples are nations within a nation. And so they have a unique status. So we're interested in their self-rule, their self-determination. This picture here is actually from Standing Rock. A lot of the canoe families greeted people at Standing Rock and on the Missouri River. So there's a paradox, though, in what I want to tell you today, that there is no such thing as Native American spirituality or Native American religion. There is no term in any American Indian language that means religion or spirituality for that matter. Native traditions are so integrated into all of life that they cannot be separated out from other aspects of life. Hunting, traditionally, was religious and still is spiritual, cultural. Everything, planting, everything. So I hate when people say, well, they're the Native American religion. There is no one American Indian religious tradition. They are all different, and they all are dependent and related to their local environments. Yet, at the same time, though, we can identify common themes in American Indian cultural traditions. And so I want to point out 4 themes that cut across or that are shared widely by indigenous traditions, in order for us to think about this question of we are water, we are water. So I'm drawing here on a couple of books. One by Thomas Norton Smith, The Dance of Person and Place. Norton Smith is a Seneca Indian scholar. This was produced in 2010. As well as an oldie but goodie, Joseph Epps Brown, Spiritual Legacy of the American Indian, from a long time back. Brown actually was one of the early scholars of religious studies. All right, so I'm drawing on some of their ideas and mixing with my own. So one of the 4 concepts that I want to introduce you to is relatedness. Relatedness. This concept of relatedness spans many indigenous traditions, if not all. Basically, the idea here is that we are all relatives. The concept is, from American Indian point of view, is that we are all relatives. All persons, places, and actions are interconnected. All persons, places, and actions are interconnected. So there is a visualizing, and it's important to visualize and construct relationships. It's important to visualize and construct relationships so that any being one might meet then is considered a relative. Considered a relative. You might think of the expression Mother Earth, right? You probably heard this expression, Mother Earth. Well, that expresses a relationship of kinship, interrelatedness. So important to write down here the word kinship. And it's a web. It's a web of interrelatedness, of interconnection. Not just with humans, but with mountains, with rocks, with the weather, with stars, with soil, with insects. All of life is considered kin. And by virtue of this interrelationship, therefore, all beings are due respect. By virtue of this relationship, then, all beings are due respect. So I asked you, what was your relationship to water? What was your relationship to water? So this is a way of thinking about what is our relationship to water? Visualizing and thinking about that. All right, our second concept is one of circularity. Circularity. That commonly in American Indian traditions, we see that processes are thought of not in linear or in lines or in evolutionary kinds of models or perspectives, that life is considered cyclical. There's attention paid to the seasons, and seasons aren't thought of as, in a sense, following one after the other, forever, but they are thought of as being cycles of the year. We might also think about the cycle of life, So death is not considered the end for indigenous peoples. In fact, sometimes they say that the elders and the young folks are, in fact, the closest to each other, the elders and the babies, because the elders are going to where the babies just came from. So there is this idea then of life as a cycle as well in many Native traditions. We might think about, too, the water cycle, that you learn about the water cycle in your science classes. But for indigenous peoples, Native peoples believe that they are part of the water cycle, that they are not separate from it. But for instance, among the Hopi Indians in the Southwest, that they believe that when they die, they become cloud people, that their spirit becomes part of the clouds, that they will return during the ceremonial seasons to bring rain to their community and sustain their community. So Native people then are part of the water cycle, not separate from it. Another important aspect of circularity is this concept of reciprocity. Reciprocity, meaning exchange, meaning mutual support, gift giving, sharing. That this is considered a cyclical process of mutual support. This image here is a picture of a beaded button or beaded medallion or pin. And you can see the four directions being represented here, north, south, east, west. And so in some sense, we can see the circle that's circumscribed by these four directions. But also, this pin doesn't really show it, but the universe is really thought of actually in terms of 7 dimensions, not just the 4 dimensions on this plane, but the above, the below, and the center place. And so these directions are actually honored and recognized in Native American rituals. So, okay, so circularity. The next one is a bit harder to understand. The power of thought and speech. The power of thought and speech. American Indians, in religious traditions, we see this concept of speech being powerful. The mind is a generative force. The mind is a creative, generative force in American Indian religious traditions. And speech then only enhances the power of the mind. So if someone, like in Cherokee religious traditions, there are practices to protect against thinkers, believe it or not. There are certain prayers that you can say to try to protect you against people who are thinking about you. That says something about the power of thought, right? That there would be these kinds of prayers. So if we think about speech then, where does speech come from? Well, when we speak, of course, we're drawing on the mind, but we also are using our breath, and we know that breath is associated with life. Breath is moist, so we also have, in a sense, the words are being empowered through the vital life force, essentially. That breath is associated with life. Wetness is associated with life. Our bodily warmth is associated with life. Our blood and our heart. So when we speak, then our thoughts are being, in a sense, empowered further through these aspects of our life force. So, whoops. Oops. Okay. So in American Indian religious traditions, then we see that naming brings about a real kind of presence. That when a spiritual being is named, that they are thought to actually be present. It's not just a symbolic representation, but I think about, for instance, there among the Haudenosaunee or the Iroquois people, they have a person that they call the peacemaker, who came to them and brought them a set of teachings, but they never call the peacemaker by his name, because to do that would, in a sense, call him to be present. So this idea then that naming brings about a real presence. So language in American Indian traditions then is thought to be compulsive, to compel. A creation myth, for instance, that's told, a creation story. There are a lot of typically ritual prohibitions and prescriptions about how that story is told, because it is thought that when you tell the story, you're not simply telling a story, you are in fact reenacting creation through the power of thought and speech. So this is another aspect of American Indian religious traditions, or spiritual traditions. All right, and then the fourth element I want to point out is this expansive concept of persons. Expansive concept of persons. I think this also can be challenging. An entity is a person based upon their participating in a network, like a web. An entity is a person by virtue of their participating in a network or a web of moral obligation. A person is a being that participates in a web of moral obligation. So, in American Indian traditions, then, animals and other non-human beings are raised to the status of persons. This is an important point I want you to make note of. That an entity is a person if that entity participates in a web of moral obligations, participates in a community. Animals and other non-human beings are raised to the status of persons. All beings, therefore, are understood as kin, as relatives, and they are due respect. Now, what does this suggest about humans, though? What does this suggest about humans? I think we tend to equate humans with persons. But from this point of view, not all human beings are persons. Not all human beings are persons. Not all human beings participate in a web of moral obligation. There are many stories of animals, plants, who have come to the aid of native people, who have given them a medicine of some kind, or have given them direction or some kind of help. So this would be an example of participating in a web of moral obligation. And I think we can say that there are people in our society who do not feel moral obligation to each other. Okay, so I would like for us to take a quick look at this text here, and you'll kind of get the idea. Oh, let's see. I can't seem to. Oh, here it is. Okay, wait, here it is. Let's see if I can pull it up here. This is from the Haudenosaunee people, or the Iroquois people. I'm not going to read it all to you, but I'd like you just to read it quietly to yourself and to think about it for a moment. This is called the Thanksgiving Address. It is, the Haudenosaunee people live in upstate New York and in southern Canada. They give this address before and after every meeting that they have, every social gathering. And you can see that it's basically a greeting to all beings in the cosmos. Today we have gathered, and we see that the cycles of life continue. We've been given the duty to live in balance and harmony with each other, all living things. So now we bring our minds together as one, and we give greetings and thanks to each other as people. Now our minds are one. And so as you progress here, it addresses Mother Earth. It addresses the waters. We give thanks to the waters of the world for quenching our thirst and providing us strength. So this address acknowledges, it reaches out to, it recognizes all of these beings as kin. Yeah, you want to scroll? The fish, the food plants, the medicine plants, the animals. I should tell you, sometimes this address can go on for an hour, okay? So depending, or even longer. And it's done, like I said, at the beginning and at the end. But you can see here the themes of reciprocity, of the cycle of life, of recognizing all life as kin. And I think this is this is just a short version. Every version of it is kind of different. Yeah. So there's a link to it that you'll be able to look at it, and you might even think about it as we come upon the Thanksgiving holiday. What are you thankful for? What are you thankful for? What is your relationship to all of these beings? Okay, let's see. Oh, and also this idea of now our minds are one. I think that's the cyclical aspect of this. With this prayer, well, it's not really a prayer, it's an address, but this idea of it coming back to now of addressing all and bringing, it's constituting the community. It's constituting that web of relatedness right there in that address. And it says, now our minds are one. Now we are all together. We are all together, and the power of the mind. So, okay, can we go back to the, okay, great, thank you. Okay, I can't go on here somehow. Okay, there we go. All right, so then when I see this image here, I don't think that these folks are just thinking about our bodies being some percentage of water. That they are saying we are water protectors. That water is our mother. Water is our grandmother. Water is our blood, in a sense, our kin. And so we are here to protect her. The idea as well, so we can see, in a sense, water is a person, that water gives to us. Water helps us stay alive. Without water, we would die. Water helps us through all aspects of our life. In a sense, too, we are water is a way to call on the water, that through the power of thought and speech, it's calling upon the water, it's acknowledging the water, the water is present. So I think something more, I think this, in a sense, helps us to understand why were the water protectors so, they stayed for over a year. They stayed through bitter winter. There were hundreds of arrests. There were hundreds of injuries. So it's because they are fighting for their mother, for their grandmother, the water. Okay, I have a short video I'd like to play, and it is of Oren Lyons. Oren Lyons, he is a faith keeper among the Iroquois people, the Haudenosaunee people. It's related to our talk.
And we're having a big celebration at Onondaga because I think I was the first graduate from Onondaga. My uncle said to me, he was sitting on the Council of Chiefs at that time, and he said, well, let's go fishing. And I said, that's a good idea. Yeah, because I knew he was a good fisherman. He knew where everything was. And so we went fishing. And he took me out on this lake and we're going to fish for bass. So I was very happy to be sitting there in the boat. And they had the motor, small motor, 15 horse. And we went out and anchored by a bluff. And a lot of bass there, run right straight down. And so we got our lines out and we were sitting there. And he said, well, you just graduated from the university. Yeah, I said, I did. That's good. He said, you know, it's been a long time since we had anybody do that. Yeah. What'd you learn? Oh, I said, I took painting. I learned a lot about painting. That's good instruction, helped me out. That's good, he said. What else you learn? I said, I learned about people. I'm pretty much brought up at Onondaga. And I said, different kinds of people. They think different. Yeah, he says, that's very true. He said, what else? I said, well, we had a good coach. Coach Simmons, good lacrosse coach. Nice man. Yeah, he says, I know Coach Simmons, a good man. Very nice man, he said. Well then, he said, he was sitting there. Then you must know who you are, he said. And I said, yeah, I think so. So we're just quiet for a while, and he says, can you tell me who you are? And I began to understand that I was sitting on one end of the boat, and he was on the other end of the boat by the motor, and I was kind of captured there. I said, well, I said, I'm Joey Quisson. Mm-hmm. He said, it's an old name, he said. It's an old name. Yeah, I said, I have that name. And I went on through my name, Warren Lyons, my mother's name, my father's name, and their clans. My father was an eel, my mother was a wolf, and we go by the mother's side, so Wolf Clan, yeah. And then he would say, and that's it, huh? That's it. That's who you are. And I realized, that I was being really cornered here, and he was pressing me. And I went on to everything that I could possibly think of, and every time I would finish, he would say, that's it, huh? And I said, well, that's all I know. All right. Need help? I said, yeah. Yeah, apparently I need help. All right, he said, let me help you, he said. And on the bluff, just as I could say right where we're sitting here, and I could point to that tree up there. And that's what he did. There was a young pine growing off the bluff, gripped right into the rock. He said, you see that young tree? I said, yeah. He said, well, that's who you are. You're the same as that tree. He says, you see how it's holding on to the earth? Yeah. He says, that's how you are. He said, we're dependent. We're rooted on the earth. He said, we're part of the earth. We're the same as that tree. He says, you're the same. You're the same as that tree. You need water. You need light. You're dependent. He said, without the earth, you wouldn't be here. He said, that's why we say our mother. He says, because it's your mother. He said, you're dependent, total dependent. I said, I see that, I understand that. And he said, oh, he said, watch your line, you got a bite. And we caught a lot of fish that day. He didn't ask me any other question. But when we got home, I thought about this. I said, you know, he planned that whole thing from when he said, let's go fishing. Because he could see that I was arrogant in my position of who I was, and feeling pretty good about myself, and feeling pretty, I guess, I don't know, feisty, whatever all you want to say. And he could see I needed some instruction. And he must have planned that whole thing. You know, as time went on, the more I would think about it, the more I realized that he was concerned I was going to be going off in the wrong direction. I really needed help. So after 4 years of university, I learned more on that boat. A couple hours. So, and instructed by a man who never went beyond 5th grade, who knew a lot more than I did. And so it gave me a base of reflection. He gave me a lot that day.
Sorry. Okay, so then humans have the potential to become persons. Humans have the potential to become persons. So I want to give you this question to think about. How might we become persons in the sense that American Indian religious traditions think of persons? How might we become persons? I'm not suggesting... What? I'm not suggesting that we appropriate American Indian religious traditions for ourselves. These are traditions that are rooted in place, they are rooted in community. We would not go to another people's traditions and borrow them. So I'm not suggesting that.
And the Confederacy is better known as the Iroquois.
That's okay.
We're old people.
Oren still wants to talk, I guess. There's a whole hour thing. It's really awesome. Take a look at it. Just Google him. He's like my hero. Okay. So thank you. So I'm not saying let's borrow American Indian religious traditions. I'm saying let's think about what do you want to be a person? Do you want to be a person? Do you want to understand yourself as part of a web of community, of obligation to each other? And I think this is what Parable of the Sower is really about in my feeling. That in American Indian traditions, there are many stories that we would call prophecies. And they are like what Butler is talking about. They are in some sense a prediction of things that will happen. But the important thing to know about prophecy is that these are actually warnings, that they're warnings. And so they're warnings about what happens when we're not persons, right? When we're not recognizing our kinship to all of life, our dependence, our utter dependence. on all life, and therefore our responsibility to all of life. So this is how I think about Parable of the Sower then, that she's giving us a chance to see this is what's going to happen. Not in my generation, maybe not in yours, but very soon if we are not careful. And we only have to look here at, for instance, this is a map, you can't really tell, of pipeline spills in the last, 20 years or so. Pipeline spills all over. And this is why the water protectors were so adamant and vigilant. We can think about the Deepwater Horizon spill in the Gulf of Mexico in 2010. And just in terms of your ethos here, there were hundreds of pictures of poor animals I could have picked, and I did not pick those poor animal pictures of animals, covered in oil. But this is our water. This is what we are doing to our mother. So do we want that, or do we want to think of ourselves as part of this earth? As part of this earth. Now our minds are one, the Haudenosaunee prayer says. We can only think about Flint, Michigan, and that they are still using bottled water since 2014. So, what Butler is talking about, it is a serious warning to us, and we can see some of the signs happening. Or do we want to see ourselves as part of a global community of relatives and kin? How would that change the way we think, the way we feel, the way we behave? Maybe it wouldn't be hyper-empathy. Maybe she's telling us something about kinship, right? That she feels so deeply that what happens to someone else, she feels in her own body. This is a picture of Puerto Rico. Tell me this is not apocalyptic. What's going on for people in Puerto Rico right now is the apocalypse. There are people who are getting disease unneeded, unnecessarily, because we are not sending in help. So do we want that, or do we want to be, as Butler says, earth seed, right? Do we want to think of ourselves as part of the earth? I think that Butler is really trying to envision for us a new religious or way of life, and so I really encourage you to think about her work very seriously. We can take root among our kin. All right, thank you very much.